Hello, hello. Hopefully we make it through with the microphones. The new ones have not arrived yet, so we're using the old sound system. So before we get started, Village of Anmore would like to open our meeting by recognizing the many Indigenous people of our area, including the following First Nations with communities that are located in the region that we now know as Metro Vancouver. It'd be the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam. Further, we'd like to honor the important place in history occupied by the many tutorial keepers of these lands and waters around us since time immemorial. I'd like to call the meeting to order for the regular council meeting. And could I get approval of the agenda? Moved. Second. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Public input. Public is allowed to welcome to participate in the public portion of the meeting. We want to remind members that matters raised here are for council's consideration and should be constructively focused on agenda items only. Anybody for public input? If you could hit the little thing to the blue.
Is that better? Does that work? Okay.
That
I'm not positive this hits the agenda, but it's about rezoning. And I was just wondering if the properties that are currently rezoned RS1 for subdivision would qualify for this new designation that the province wants to have communities do for properties. I understand that pre-zoning is going to be required, and I just wondered if that was going to affect those properties.
We get into Bill 44 in the agenda later on, but you'll notice that because of our designation being a rural designation, a lot of those fourplexes, sixplex rezoning does not apply to us because we don't have the services to facilitate them. Okay? Any other public input? Okay.
Nancy Maloney, 1724 East Road. Can you hear okay? Yes. Related to agenda item 11C on page 174, the Pinnacle Ridge Hillside OCP amendment application. I would like to remind Council of the importance of resident input and consultation, as this Burke Mountain style plan represents a significant departure from past practice in Anmore. Also, there could be significant water drainage impact to nearby properties as a result of the forest clear cut. Some years ago, there was a referendum in which residents indicated their support for maintaining 1 acre lot size. In a more recent year, the village contracted Therese Mikkelsen to conduct a village-wide survey, which indicated no significant acceptance for transitioning to smaller lot size. Related to Icona's highly controversial Anmore South development proposal, the present council has publicly stated that its approval would permit the maintenance of large lots and the remainder of the still rural designated Anmore. In fact, Councillor Trowbridge stated at a council meeting recently that he would not want 4 dwellings on 1 acre in his neighborhood, which is the case for this development. Specifically related to Pinnacle Ridge Hillside development, using the term semi-rural does not actually ensure that this designation is accurate. This presented plan would be very suitable in a more urban municipal environment. Just step back.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other public input? No? See none? Okay, we'll move on. Could I get adoption of the minutes for the May 7th, 2024 meeting? Somebody move the recommendation. Moved. Seconded. Any discussion? See none? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Is there any business arising from those minutes? No? We're going to move on to the consent agenda. We only have one item on the consent agenda, and that's the release of the resolution that authorizes the release of the following resolution to the future open council meetings regarding the council's consideration and update to the zoning bylaw to meet 44 requirements. Could I get someone to move release of the resolution? Move. Seconded. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We're now on to 9A, legislative reports, bylaw 697-2024, zoning bylaw amendment, bill number 35, and 44. A report dated May 31st, 2024 from our planner. Mr. Joseph, welcome.
There we go. Sorry, thanks, Your Worship. Just waiting for a presentation to get on screen here.
While it's coming up on the screen, is that what you're waiting for it to come up on the screen? I will let everybody know that last night, West Vancouver Council voted unanimously to reject the province's housing rules this past Monday, which was quite interesting. And I know that my colleague, Councillor Cryer, said that Port Moody is having a town hall regarding the same provincial regulations and steps that they're going to be moving forward on as well. So here we go.
Thanks. So I'll be presenting the report to Council for bylaw number 697/2024, the zoning bylaw amendment for Bill 35 and 44. So just a quick brief, we'll just do an introduction to the report, some background on the legislation, some discussions on the proposed zoning amendments, as well as any other legislative compliance requirements for the village, and then the recommended option.
Maybe bring the mic just a little closer
Yep.
if you could.
So the purpose of the report is just to provide council with an overview of the housing legislation for Bill 35 and Bill 44, and some of the required proposed zoning bylaw amendments to enter into compliance with the bills. So in late 2023, Bill 44 and Bill 35 were passed, and those are amendments to the actual Local Government Act itself. As of May 1st, the Bill 35 is in force, and that's for short-term rental legislation, which I'll talk about later on. By June 30th, that's the deadline to be in compliance with all Bill 44 requirements. So the report will touch upon requirements that are applicable to the village, as well as any proposed bylaws for the village compliance. So Bill 44 introduces and regulates small-scale multi-unit housing, or SMA, and the goal is to increase ground-oriented, form and scale compatible housing in BC. That includes secondary suites, as well as detached accessory dwelling units, which include coach houses, among others. So the applicability of whether local governments need to comply is generally revolving around population size and proximity to urban containment boundary. Again, the deadline is June 30th. So staff have reviewed our own zoning bylaws and referred to the provincial policy manual and site standards for small-scale multi-unit housing, and have consulted legal opinion, and the following requirements will be imposed on the village. So section 481.3, subsection 3, this permits the land use of one or both of the following in all single detached or 2-unit residential zones, either a secondary suite and or an accessory dwelling unit. The next requirement is the permittance of 3 to 4 dwelling units for parcels wholly or partly within the urban containment boundary. So that's 3 units for each parcel that are smaller or equal to 280 square meters, or 4 units for each parcel that are larger than 200 square meters. So there is a few exemptions to these requirements. For populations less than 5,000 and no parts are within the urban containment boundary, so this does not apply to the village. Parcels that are above or equal to 450 square meters are exempt just for the capacity to subdivide. So, however, the secondary suite and or accessory dwelling units still apply to these parcels. The last exemption is for lands that are not connected to water or sewage services provided by municipality or regional district. So they must be connected to both, otherwise they are exempt from these requirements. So some proposed zoning amendments. The village proposes to permit only secondary suites in all residential zones outside of the urban containment boundary to comply with the Bill 44 requirements. So local governments are required to consider the provincial policy manual and site standards, which are attachment 3 in the report. These are non-binding policy guidances. However, any proposed bylaws still must permit the small density requirements, and the village must do its due diligence to allow for that. So staff have considered Table 5 of the provincial policy guidelines, and that's for lots requiring a minimum of 2 units. So in context, largely, the village of Anmore consists of large lots, single-family dwellings. We're only permitting secondary suites to comply with Bill 44. Current floor area ratio and lot coverage would allow for 3 stories already, and setbacks, staff believe, can accommodate secondary suites. So not many amendments in these regards. However, there is a few proposed changes. So for height, currently it ranges from 9.5 meters to 10 meters for primary dwelling units. Staff proposed increasing it to 11 meters. There's been recent industry ceiling height standards that have changed from 8 feet to 9 feet. And so these proposed changes would actually allow for 3 stories and increase the viability of SMA requirements. The other proposed amendments are off-street parking. So currently, 2 spaces are required per dwelling unit in all these residential zones. And the proposed amendments are for 1 space per dwelling unit. So some proposed zoning amendments for 3 to 4 lots in the urban containment boundary. Staff have identified 3 residential zones in the urban containment boundary. That's the Anmore Green Estates, Residential 1, and infill development. Again, the same considerations are required for local governments to refer to the policy. So staff have considered Table 6 of the policy for lots requiring a minimum of 3 or 4 units that are less than 1,215 square meters. These apply to Anmore Green Estates. There's 39 strata lots that are greater than 280 meters squares. So staff are recommending to permit 4 dwelling units with no specificity to configuration, just to allow for some flexibility moving forward. Some proposed changes: current front yard setbacks are 5.5 meters, the rear is 2 meters, interior side is 1.5, and exterior side setbacks are 3 meters. The proposed amendments are for the front to be a 4 meter as opposed to the prescribed 2 meters in the policy, just due to the absence of sidewalks and boulevards for trees. Staff also recommend decreasing the side yard setback to 1.2 to allow for the 4-unit density. Similar heights have been proposed, so instead of 9.5 for primary, we're proposing 11 meters for principal dwellings for the 3-story, as well as 7 meters for coach housing requirements. Off-street parking as well. Again, current is 2 spaces per dwelling unit. Staff are proposing 1 space per dwelling unit. Lastly, Table 6 have been considered for lots requiring a minimum of 4 units that are more than 1,215 meters squared. So there's 8 RS1 lots and 2 infill parcels. 3 are over 450 square meters, which are exempt from these requirements. So staff recommend permitting up to 4 dwelling units. Again, the configuration not defined to keep it flexible. All previous amendments to the residential zones proposed for the secondary suites should apply to these. However, another amendment has been proposed, and that's for infill development lots within the urban containment boundary. So currently there's a sort of sliding scale as in regards to parcel size and increase of floor area ratio and bonus floor area. So staff recommend an FAR of 0.3 for infill lots in the urban containment boundary, with a 125 square meter bonus floor area for parcels that are larger than 2,200 square meters. There's been some additions and amendments to some of the definitions. That's just to gain some more clarity around some of the definitions and further align with Bill 35 and 44. So the inclusion of principal residency, as well as urban containment boundary, and the amendment to the secondary suite. So amendments to Part 6. Staff recommend the deletion of 6.3.4 that prohibits secondary suites from 2-family dwellings, and 6.3.7 which prohibits secondary suites in RCH1, RCH2, and all CD zones. This would be in contravention to Bill 44, so they must be deleted. 6.6.1B, bed and breakfast. This is where we regulate our short-term rentals. Staff recommend to include language around principal residence requirements, as well as language to limit short-term rentals to a principal residence and or either one of a secondary suite or accessory dwelling unit. These are the requirements that are enforced now for Bill 35. In addition to the Bill 44 amendments, local governments are now prohibited from holding a public hearing on any proposed zoning bylaws or amendments. If a zoning bylaw is proposed for the purpose of complying with the SMART regulations, amongst others. So notice must still be given prior to first reading of any proposed bylaws in accordance with Section 467 of the Local Government Act. Staff would like to note that the legislative requirements have been met and council may grant first, second, third, and fourth reading of proposed amendment bylaw. So the recommendation on the table is that council grant first, second, third, and fourth reading to Anmore zoning bylaw amendment 697 to 2024 as presented. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Could I get someone? Let's get the motion on the table. Could I get someone to move the motion and second it? Okay, I'll open up now for conversation. Councillor Trowbridge.
Thank you. A couple of things where it says only secondary suites in all residential zones, and then it speaks about one or both. Is there a recommendation in this somewhere that recommends we allow both on all lots?
Thanks, Councillor Trowbridge. No, there is no recommendation to allow both. These are the proposed amendments that we've proposed. However, we can consider both, but that means we'd have to actually amend most of the other regulations regarding those residential zones, like setbacks, to allow for increased density in all residential zones. So this is just like a blanket amendment to allow secondary suites in order to be in compliance with Bill 44, the minimum compliance requirements for
Okay, so Bill 44 indicates in 481.3 Section 7 that we must consider. So it's not totally prescriptive in terms of mandate. However,
Just bring that a little close there.
is that better? Is that helpful? Okay. No. Okay, hang on. Okay, so it's not totally prescriptive, but we have to comply, or I presume we will bring unwanted attention to the village that may force our hand to do something. So I'm just going to throw out something for discussion that I'm not very comfortable with 3 dwellings per lot, regardless of the size of the lot. And I'll talk about AGE separately. But I'd like to see something that scales, saying 0 to 0.499 in terms of an acre is a secondary suite, because there's a strong urgency to provide that. 0.5 to 0.99 is either a secondary suite or an ADU, and 1 acre plus can be a secondary suite and or an ADU.
Thank you, Councillor Trowbridge. So Bill 44, I'll get to your comment, just a little description here. We're just trying to put carte blanche that secondary suites are allowed across RS1, all zones within the village. There is also on the agenda tonight a coach house report, which will help provide clarity about whether we will allow, the council can deliberate tonight if you allow a principal, a secondary suite, and a coach house, and a sliding scale associated with that. So anything just under an acre, proposing that you could have a secondary suite, coach house, and a principal. Below that level, either a coach house or a secondary suite and the principal. And as it goes down, the removal of certain items as it goes to a smaller lot. So maybe that kind of provides some clarity.
That's what I'm proposing.
Yeah.
Do you have more, Chris? I don't want to. Nope. Also, one of the things that stood out to me is the fact that we have a minimum of 2 parking spaces currently, and we're recommending off-street parking requirement going down to 1 space. I want to hear the rationale for that, because it intuitively feels as though we're adding dwelling units per lot and reducing the requirement for off-street parking when many of our streets here are 15-meter roadbeds. We've turned almost every street in Anmore to a no parking area. I don't want to see a situation where we are creating housing units without ample off-street parking and then plugging our roads. There's a lot of people who have been very concerned about any densification and what that does to our roads. And we have permits, and now we have a bylaw issue, and we have to have a bylaw person making sure that the cars on the street belong to the house, et cetera, et cetera. So if I'm sure there are reasons, or you wouldn't have recommended it, so I just want to hear what those reasons are.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I can speak to that. Yeah, I would say the conversion of single-family housing to include a secondary suite largely consists of an existing house and driveway. And so we're trying to balance the requirements to not exclude secondary dwelling units as per Bill 44, but also kind of maintain some sort of requirement for parking, and then letting the market dictate what happens for parking on a property. Chris, if you want to add anything.
I'd also add that the SMOO policy document that goes with this, the provincial government provided guidelines in regards to how many stalls per dwelling, and it was between basically 0.5 and 1. So we went to the upper end of the recommendation. I think I'd always go back to what Josh said there as well, as the market will decide as well, as in, and more typically, as stated before, residents are typically rely upon vehicles, and so a developer should consider that when they're developing a property of providing appropriate parking, because as council have the bylaw currently of no on-street parking, they should be thinking of that as they provide housing in this regard of you're not going to be able to park on the street, so therefore ensure you have adequate parking. Again, these are considerations for council. You could ask to amend that, consider it. We're just trying to provide a guideline based upon what the province has asked of staff as well to bring this forward to council.
I just want to clarify something that you said, Chris, and that is the fact that you mentioned the word developers. I think it's important that everybody realize that Bill 44 isn't about new product as much as it's about existing product. And as I look out along Ravenswood, and being fortunate enough to be here when Ravenswood was first put in, there was no suites, no on-street parking, and a 15-meter road right away. And over the 24 years that I've actually owned property in Anmore, there's been several occasions we actually blocked that road off during Halloween because of the problem. If you bring parking onto that road, how are we going to get emergency vehicles through there? So, I think it's important that everybody realizes that this Bill 44 is a pretty heavy hand that the government is putting on us. This is nothing to be taken lightly. This is going to change communities throughout the province significantly. And we're going to have to make adjustments. We have an open ditch policy. Well, luckily we have an open ditch there. We may have to close that in to be able to facilitate what they're asking for and demanding in Bill 44. So I just wanted to stress that as well, because right now we don't have suites in Ravenswood, and this Bill 44 is dictating we will have suites in Ravenswood, whether we like it or not, and we're going to have to make the necessary steps to facilitate that. So, sorry, Councillor Trowbridge.
No, it's essentially where I was headed next. it isn't about new builds and pre-planning all of that. So I still remain concerned about the single parking spot off street. There, I think it's interesting how there's been so much concern about densification, and this has been floating around for quite a bit of time, and I really believe our residents should be paying attention to this, because we're talking about a transformation. This is not a new development somewhere, be it Anmore South or somewhere else. This is a transformation of the village right here around us, so we have to be very careful how this goes, while admittedly respecting our role to support the provincial initiative. I understand that. But I, for one, if we're going to try and accommodate certain pieces in order to not put a spotlight on us and create any sort of provincial vindictive action to come and force us to do things, the parking one would be one that I would try to modify. In addition to that, when we talk about AGE, which is a strata, and we talk about those homes and their little strata street there, this says essentially that each one of those homes can be 4 separate dwellings. That's how it reads right now. So I believe that we would have an obligation, because that's in the urban, and please correct me, either one of you, but because that's in an urban containment boundary, I believe we are obligated to allow 4 dwelling units in AGE. However, when you read Bill 44, a strata and their bylaws supersedes the province and the municipality. Certainly the municipality and the province to some degree. The strata can change their internal bylaws to not accommodate that, but as a council, we have to allow those 4 units. Is that a fair depiction?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. My only clarification would be is that the Strata Act is at the same level of governance as the Local Government Act and the zoning bylaw requirements. So that's how the Strata Act interacts with the strata making their own rules, inverted commas, making their own rules. They have to apply to our rules and everything else in their bylaw as well. So they can actually say, we have to allow for up to 4 units, but they can say you're not allowed within our strata to build those 4 units within their strata bylaws, as long as they follow the provincial requirements of the Strata Act.
But if that strata said we're going to go ahead and comply with that, then Anmore Green Estates could theoretically, with some redevelopment or whatever they have to do, have 4 living units for every one of those homes on that street.
Correct.
Yeah. And then finally, just addressing Bill 35, because that's quite different than 44.
Yeah.
Bill 35 was a summation by the provinces that was put in place to limit short-term rental, STRs. And it was it contemplated everything that's an STR to be below 90 days. But I'm seeing language in here that says, and I won't waste everyone's time looking it up, but it essentially says that if the owner of the land occupies one of the living units, one of the dwellings on the property, whether that be a coach house, a suite, or the main or principal residence, I'll call it, then that allows them to circumvent that restriction and have short-term rental on that property. Is that correct?
So, Trump, just to rephrase your question, you're asking for the 90-day maximum on property, whether a principal residence on the property would circumvent that if they either live in their primary or one of secondary or accessory dwelling units.
Correct.
No, I don't believe so. I think they're they're different to each other. There's the one maximum for the time frames, and then there's the requirement that whoever the operator of a short-term rental is the principal residence, which means they stay the longer term within a year in that property. They may operate on their property from a secondary suite or accessory dwelling unit or a primary dwelling unit. So that gives them flexibility to rent out other units on their property while also accommodating a short-term rental, but they must be on the property and a primary residence.
But would that be only long-term rental or short-term rental?
Short-term rental.
Right. So if the owner of the property occupies one of those units, they can now do short-term rental on their property with only one mandated parking spot. Thanks.
Councillor Richardson.
Okay, so while we're on parking, since we're here to do the fourth reading, if I look at Ravenswood, I would say most of the houses there have a 3-car garage and probably 4 parking spaces outside. How hard is it to actually just modify this to say 2? Like change it from 1 to 2? Because for most of the places in Anmore, they're already there. It certainly would be an issue with countryside because that's going to be more restrictive. I actually don't know the parking on the street there or not, but I think for most of Anmore it's okay to go to 2, and maybe it's not a bad thing. The other point I want to make is in your page 214 of the agenda, and Councillor Trowbridge raised this, only secondary suites in all residential zones. That's not actually true because we're not taking away the ability to have a coach house. Right? So you're in RS1 on acre lots currently, and even in the modified zoning bylaw, you are allowed to have a coach house and a secondary suite, correct?
Maybe. It's a very good question, and that's what we're trying to clear up with regard to the coach house, because I would say there's a ambiguity within the existing bylaw if that is actually allowed or not. If you want a defined answer, I would say within the village right now there are coach houses and secondary suites and primary residence on one lot.
Yes, and this bylaw talks about coach houses and that you're allowed to have that. Even the modified version, like you didn't strike out coach houses out of this bylaw.
No, because we're only looking to allow secondary suites via Bill 44.
I guess I'm trying to say for the residents that have coach houses or are thinking about coach houses, I read that you're still allowed to have coach houses despite that only secondary suite statement.
Oh, yes, sorry.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So many things going through my head right now. Just a couple of points of clarity. Obviously, you've prepared this to apply Bill 44 as it applies to Anmore and our limitations and restrictions. Okay. We're connected to Metro Water, or are we? Because we're connected to Port Moody's water. And also, Anmore Green Estates is connected to sewer, but they're not directly connected to Metro sewer or Anmore sewer. So is that a technicality, or is that an issue? And also, I'll throw this in there, say for Anmore Green Estates, there is a defined sewer area. I mean, if you look at the actual map of what the sewer serves, it's the actual footprint of the houses, and that was conditional for even getting sewer to that. So that must really muddy the waters for this. I'll let you answer.
Yes. It is something that staff will have to seek legal advice on when it comes to if someone wants to develop in the fashion this zoning bylaw may allow for into the future, because of the agreement between the village, Anmore Green Estates, the school district, Port Moody, and Metro Vancouver, and that agreement in place right now, and the servicing agreement of how
Right.
that would interact with this proposed development.
Okay. And then another question, just so I understand. So for lots under a certain threshold, you're allowed a secondary suite within the existing restaurant or residence, but not a coach house. Is that correct?
Sorry. Yeah, secondary suites will be allowed in the primary dwelling, and as per the definition, they belong in a detached primary dwelling. That's the definition of a secondary suite.
Okay.
So you can't have secondary suites in a coach house.
Okay, fair enough. Now, also, obviously, septic trumps everything. So, like, say for Anmore Green or Countryside, they're going to have to do an evaluation of their sewage treatment plant before they consider any more suites, and that would trump all of this, I would imagine.
Yes, because the zoning bylaw allows for something to happen. It doesn't mean it definitely will happen.
Right.
There's other barriers to entry, such as subdivision, and can they meet the requirements of subdivision, and other such things as building permits, blah,
Okay.
blah, blah. So there's other things that need to be considered prior to it physically happening.
Yeah, so you need all your sign-offs and all the letters from the authorities having jurisdiction, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't change, and it could get in the way of all this. So this doesn't trump any of that, I would
No,
imagine.
correct.
Okay. It's kind of a rhetorical question. I knew the answer, but I thought it was worth asking. Just as a general statement, I mean, I understand the housing crisis, and we've all been concerned about the housing crisis, and we've talked about it. I wish the province would just set targets for communities and let the communities decide how we want to do this. And hold us to it, you know. But as Councillor Trowbridge was saying, this is the heavy hand being imposed on us, right? We talked about this, and here it is. We'll do what we have to do, but it does muddy the waters for me a little bit as far as how this community develops. I've always sort of said to people, I want to kind of leave the community the way it is and concentrate on the large undeveloped areas to address the different types of housing. That was always my vision, but of course, you know, things change.
I just realized I didn't answer Councillor Trowbridge's or Councillor Richardson's question regarding could we change the bylaw tonight regarding parking stalls? The answer is yes, very easily. If that's the direction from council to want to change it from 1 to whatever number you decide, we can do that tonight prior to reading.
Thank you. Councillor Trowbridge has something further to add.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Just a quick follow-up to what Councillor Weverink was saying. There's, and I'm talking about Bill 35 here. It states that Bill 35 aims to establish a provincial rule to regulate short-term rentals consistently throughout BC and provide local governments with stronger enforcement tools. What tools are those that we expect to have? I'm being somewhat rhetorical. I shouldn't put you on the spot, Josh.
Thanks for the question. Thanks for the question.
There are no tools coming
So,
to us.
In this report, we didn't provide any additional tools. There's also, a CAC development tool as well that's been introduced with certain bills. This is just to be in compliance due to the deadline for June 30th, so we didn't get into things that were not required of the village. Additional tools can be used, of course, and that'll be up to council's consideration. And if council wishes, staff can pursue a report and bring those to you for options later on.
Okay, I just have a few comments. As I said earlier, this is a pretty heavy hand, and this is going to have dramatic changes throughout our village. Where I really kind of am at a loss is that nobody knows this village better than the residents, staff, and council, and now we're having Victoria dictate what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. And we've certainly made certain things here, and I keep using reference to Ravenswood, which a lot of people think is a beautifully laid out street, kind of idyllic in regards to the semi-rural kind of feel and look, and now that's going to change because suites, we don't have a choice. Suites will be allowed on this along that property. My worry as well is that the building code now to put in a suite is pretty extensive and very, very financially demanding, and whether these suites will even be put in under proper building code is of concern. And this is going to go throughout all existing residences. The parking is something that really brought brought attention to me. I don't know if many of you have been following the news, but TransLink is in a very, and another year is facing a financial cliff. We don't have adequate funding for TransLink, and I can tell you right now, being on the Mayor's Council, the routes that will get cut first will be the routes to the rural communities. Because although we don't have high capacity on each of the buses do come through every 15 minutes, half an hour through the summer, but when cuts need to be made, the cuts will be coming here. It's pretty easy to see that. They're not going to be cutting SkyTrain hours, they're not going to be cutting the major routes where all the towers and density are. You know, we just don't cater to enough people here. So we're going to need, if you're demanding that we're going to be allowing every suite in every house, we need 2 parking stalls for that suite, which we're going to get to in regards to the sizing of these suites down the road, as well as the principal residence. So I think it needs to be, if it's an easy addition, it could easily be up to 2, and I think we need to push back and say that 2 because of our transit service level is just not adequate at this point in time, and you can't compare us in regards to that. You know, a lot of these things are outside of our control, being outside of the urban containment boundary. One of the questions I do have is with the proposal with Anmore South and that special study area and the possibility of going to an urban designation, how will this legislation then play into that planning process that's involved right now?
So I would say that the Bill 44 is clear on how it would relate to any residential zones which are outlined. So that's any single family or 2-unit family dwelling unit zones for the secondary suite requirements and accessory dwelling units. And all the other requirements for 3 to 4 units would still apply just as per the definitions. So any new zoning coming forward would still be, would need to comply to Bill 44.
I think it's been very clearly described in regards to that we don't really have too much of an option here. I think a couple other things that people need to know is under Bill 44, the public hearing requirements, and it says right in here, Bill 44 amends the Local Government Act, and it now will prohibit, and it stressed the word prohibit, local governments from holding a public hearing on a proposed zoning bylaw amendment if it adheres to the OCP, which they're dictating we have to have. So that is going to really limit the amount of public engagement in regards to some of these things that we normally do. So I think that's a big important thing to know as well. The Bill 35 regarding the short-term rentals and the fact that we're 15 kilometers away from a larger municipality, so it means that we're going to have to adhere to these policies, does concern me, because as Councillor Trowbridge was articulating, you could have a 1-acre parcel with a principal residence. And the way that I read the wording, it stipulates that if you have a principal residence, you could have 2 accessory residents, and they both could be used as short-term rentals.
May I speak to that?
Yes.
Yeah, so no, it's one or the other. You can only do within one dwelling unit, either a secondary suite or an accessory dwelling unit. Cannot be both. I'm just
saying, so if you have a 1-acre parcel with a principal residence on it, you have people living there, you have a suite in the basement, and you have an accessory building. The way I read it is both the accessory building and the suite could be used as short-term rental.
That's correct, yeah.
That's problematic, because in essence, you're creating a bit of like a hotel.
I would like to add, so any requirements for Bill 35 are prescribed by the province. This does not prohibit a local government from actually implementing further restrictions on short-term rentals, up to council's discretion. So if we want to pursue further restrictions, we can do so.
Okay. Okay, and then yeah, and getting back to the off-street parking, You know, it requires, so is this something that's in Bill 44 that we have to require one space per dwelling unit on street?
Sorry, no, it's not required. Again, these are as per the provincial policy guidelines, so they're non-binding, and they're just kind of prescribed to accommodate many types of local governments and their context. For our context, we've just determined one space with the rationale provided earlier. However, we're not bound by that. We can set it to 2 per parking spaces
On site.
per dwelling unit. Correct.
So theoretically, we could say that if you're adding a suite, you have to add 2 parking spots on the property for that suite.
That's correct. Yeah. Up to council's discretion. That's correct.
Chris?
I would add further clarification that the province policy document talks about council must consider. That was the legal definition of consider. And by discussing tonight, you are meeting that requirement of the province to discuss and to consider it. We as staff put 1 because that is what the policy guideline was looking at. Again, if you as council decide that that is not in keeping with Anmore's, way of life, then you are very much in consideration of the bylaw to change it to 2 and you would meet the requirements of the province as far as I understand it from the legal definition.
Yeah, I would propose then that we amend the motion that is on the table right now to satisfy that 2 units per, 2 parking spots per livable unit, and to be facilitated on the property. And that would be my friendly amendment, but I will open it up. Councillor Cryer hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you, Mayor McEwen. Further to the deadline being the end of June. What, closer still? Good Lord. Better? Okay. Further to the deadline, the end of June for this, would we have to have some of the additional bylaws in place by the end of June, or can we take some time, say, with the additional bylaws for the and/or on an RS1 that has an accessory building and a secondary suite? Do we have to get all of those? Do we have to commit to those by the end of June, or can we take some time on that?
Yeah, so as we drafted the amendments, they're to basically satisfy the baseline compliances for Bill 44. So it could be either a secondary suite and or accessory dwelling unit. In order to limit in sort of discussion and any conflicts, we opted for secondary suites as the base minimum to move forward and make us compliant by June 30th. If we wanted to further discuss that later on down the line, we can do so. But this was just for the deadline and to provide compliance for that.
Councillor Richardson.
Okay, just so I know what we're talking about, we have an amendment to accept, or we have a bylaw motion to accept it as is. You've made a friendly amendment to essentially leave the off-street parking in all sections as was. The old way was 2 spaces per dwelling unit, 1 space per employee for home occupation, 1 space per boarder, and 2 spaces per secondary suite. Those are the original. So your friendly amendment is to leave those as is? Okay.
It'll have to be accepted by whoever moved. I don't know who moved the motion. Do you know who moved the initial motion? I think it might have been Councillor Trollbridge.
We haven't.
So he would have to accept that friendly amendment.
I accept it.
And then who seconds?
Can I add another amendment?
Yeah.
I believe it was Councillor Weberink.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the motion has been amended now to go back to exactly what you said. Are you okay, Councillor Trollbridge?
Yeah, I'd like to see, and I don't know if it's required right now. I couldn't quite hear you, Josh, but I'd like to see us meet the secondary suite in general with all property sizes, but I'd like that scaling up or down, whatever way you want it. That an acre plus, you can have either or both. Between a half and an acre, you can have either or, and below half an acre, it's only a suite.
If I can just talk to that. yes, that will be coming in the next report from staff here in the coach house. And I just want to clarify, we can't really do that with this bylaw. The reason being because it isn't really in keeping with Bill 44. It's kind of a different part of our bylaw, and so we can't go first, second, third, and fourth if we were to do that.
I'm fine with that, Chris, as long as we're not voting for something that's prescriptive and causes automatically to have 3 dwellings per lot everywhere in Anmore.
Okay, so we've got the amendment, or the motion has been amended, and it's been moved and seconded, so I will see no further discussion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you both. This has not been easy. Okay. You survived, Josh. Okay, now we're going to get into what Councillor Trowbridge was referring to, the zoning bylaw amendment regarding coach houses. Report dated May 31st, 2024, from Manager of Development Services is attached. Mr. Boyd.
As promised, Councillor Trowbridge. So I'll just breeze over the background because it was already in reference to if we passed Bill 44 or not. So in the past, this coach house report has been going on since June 6th, 2023, almost a year to the day. And we're getting close to finalizing it, thankfully. Obviously, we brought a report back on April the 2nd, 2024, at a regular council meeting, where we were considering the secondary suites and coach house requirements and all the other bits and pieces evolved around Bill 44. At that meeting, council asked staff to table it and move it forward and get some more clarification with Bill 44 and bring back those bylaws. And so we separated those bylaws now. So based upon what was just read, we've moved on from Bill 44, and now we can consider just the coach house concessions. So to bring us up to speed for those not understanding what's going on right now with the coach house, the coach house in our existing bylaw is somewhat muddied by the fact of some of our definitions and the way that we described secondary suites, coach houses, and some other areas. So staff have made recommendations to clean up the definitions as posted within here in part 2 of our definitions. It will help staff and members of the public to understand our bylaw in regards to coach houses and how we actually define them going forward. So that's a significant piece of our bylaw amendment. Next section, another section within our bylaw, a lot of the parking requirements bonus floor area within our zoning bylaw is in relation to garage space being given as free space within a principal dwelling. And so we've looked to clean that up within the proposed bylaw, which will come forward at the next council meeting. And so we've provided a sliding scale with garage exemption space based upon if you're just under an acre, we give you 90 square meters, between half acre and up to just under an acre, 70 square meters, and then a third to up to half acre, 50, and then anything below, you'd have only 30 square meters of parking exempted. It just helps to clear up some of the existing zoning bylaw in relation to our garage exemption space, because it was tied more or less to the existing secondary suite and coach house. We've untangled that now to make it clear for people. Another section within this coach house report, it's a little indulgent, I suppose, from staff, but we were trying to clean up basement exemptions as well, because basement exemptions, the way our current bylaw reads, will allow you to exempt anything anywhere on the lot. So that would include, if you built a coach house, the coach house could actually have a basement which would be excluded as well from floor area. And also another clarification for staff would be the existing bylaw had I would friendly call it a bit of a typo, which caused the formula not to work as intended. So we've cleaned up the formula as well to ensure that if you're below 4 feet or more below the ground, you get your basement floor exempt. So that's what the exemption here in basement exemption will help clear up for staff and for the public. And then it will also give you a ratio. If you can only get 3 feet, roughly you'll get 75% of that square footage for free. So we have that working scale for the public. Okay, more importantly, part 6, we've tried to provide some clarity on how big a secondary suite and how many secondary suites you can have within zones going forward. The recommendation would be that based upon conversations with committees and committee of the whole, we currently have on the floor for 180 square meters. And I know council likes square footage, so I have square footage in here as well. It's just over 1,900 square feet for a secondary suite. So that can be increased or decreased depending on the conversation tonight with and direction provided to staff when we bring the bylaw forward. Some other areas that we've kind of provided some some fear of the definition for coach houses is that the coach house can be regulated by the parcel size, so a sliding scale. If you're on a full acre, you can have a larger coach house, and as you come down the scale, houses either have to become smaller or be eliminated from the parcel of the property. So basically anything below half acre, you wouldn't be allowed to have a coach house from that point. If you had above a half an acre, but below an acre, you could have up to 100 square meters. That's the way that currently I've drafted the bylaw. But again, that's up for discussion. There's a small housekeeping item as well under Part 8 where we identified a couple of missing zones. It's just the housekeeping and piece doesn't really affect anything. And in the zoning district, again, to provide some clarity on how many units you're allowed or coach houses you're allowed within an RS1 zone. Currently, I would say that it's not very clear, depending on which section you're reading, because it supersedes itself in a number of areas. We're going to provide clear direction that on an RS1 lot, you can have up to 3 dwelling units, which would be something along these lines. You could have a primary residence or 2 suites, or you could have a primary residence, a suite, and a coach house. Okay, so it would be clear definition of what you would be allowed within that zone. Right now we don't have that, and we provide clarity as well, clear clarity within an infill zone, and then within CD zones, we typically would not allow a suite and a carriage home. It would just be allowing a suite, and it would be consistent with Bill 44. And also we're just looking to decrease some setbacks to make it consistent with our infill policy with RS1. That's generally what the bylaw will bring forward, and as staff we're just looking to see if you have any kind of take on the regards to the size of secondary suites, coach houses in particular, so I can bring that bylaw back. I've actually drafted it, but one of the reasons it's not in front of you tonight was because we were amending the existing bylaw, zoning bylaw amendment, and I couldn't amend a zoning bylaw within a zoning bylaw already on the table, so it will come back in the next council meeting based upon clarifications tonight.
So just to be clear, we're just receiving this. We're going to be voting on just receiving this. You're going to take back, we're going to have a discussion or comments regarding what you proposed, and then it'll come back at a later date in a bylaw form.
Correct.
Because we couldn't do that because of the Bill 44 legislation that was going on. Thank you. And
I can read it. The recommendation is that staff be directed to bring forward a zoning amendment bylaw for council's consideration as outlined in the report dated May 31st from the Manager of Development Services entitled Zoning Bylaw Amendment Coach House. So the recommendations in this report is what he would bring back.
okay. So could I get someone to move the recommendation, in essence, to receive this and just provide direction? Move. Seconded. Now I'll open it up to council. Councilor Richardson.
Okay, so sorry to bring back, I forget how you say it, Smith or whatever it is. In your page 2, 145 of the agenda, item C in part 2 definitions, you specifically remove the ability to subdivide under strata. And I don't understand why, and if you read the SSMUH provincial policy guidelines, it actually has a big section on recommending strata as a potential to provide affordable housing. I've looked at it from many ways. You build a house, you build a coach house, without changing the look and feel of what it feels like for the village, semi-rural, rural, whatever it happens to be. You can stratify that, and you could sell one half. It's no different than a duplex, which we have in Anmore. And I think that shouldn't be removed. I think that should stay in and be allowed, because of all the things we do in Anmore, that is probably the most affordable option we would have. It be a small house of like 1,800 square feet or whatever it happens to be on a shared lot I know there's some concerns that it will prevent potentially infill. I think that's completely different. Infill, you can build a 3,000 square foot on a separate lot, and in some cases on the sides, you could even have a suite and a coach house. So I don't think it robs anything, and it does allow people who have those infill lots that are big enough to support a coach house to somehow potentially stratify a little bit and get some money out, because that always seems to be the goal. So I don't like item C at all. I'm okay with the definition of the coach house, building, et cetera, but not the part that says cannot be subdivided under the Strata Property Act. So that's my feeling on that. I think it should be allowed. It's currently allowed. Nobody ever uses it, but it is currently allowed.
Can you answer? Yeah.
I don't have a great answer to the question. But my only clarification would be staff reviewed the existing coach host policies across the Lower Mainland. It was just a consistent item within all of those policies of not allowing strata. That's honestly the only reason that it's within there. I don't have any real great answer of if we should or we shouldn't. That's the main reason behind it within there.
Okay.
Just to
I'm
follow.
gonna
Okay.
Move on. Councillor Trowbridge, did you? Oh, okay. Councillor Weber. Oh, sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I understand that, but that has to be changing. If you can put 4 units on one lot, that has to be stratified.
I think I can see the policy behind it, and I can see the reason behind it, and it's good planning reasons for removing that piece of strata and allowing the strata.
Does council have to vote on that or recommend, like, you're looking for guidance? My guidance is remove it, but I'm one of 5.
Yeah, I realize. Yeah, I resort back.
Yep. Okay. Anybody else want to make comments on the coach house?
Yeah, I mean, we're not voting right now, though.
We're only just putting forth recommendations right now, and the bylaw will come back at a subsequent meeting.
Right. So, you know what? I won't take time now, but I'm opposed to stratification of our 1-acre lots as they exist today, and I have a number of reasons for that. But if that's coming back, I'll address it then.
Anything else before I go? No? Okay. First of all, I just really wanted to thank both Josh and Chris for bringing this back, because we've had a couple of residents who have been caught in this kind of this position because they don't have a subsequent size principal residence. They can't build a subsequent carriage house for family members. And these are truly what we want to embrace in the community, is getting families to be able to do this. So I really am glad that this is coming back and being addressed, because I think these people that are in modest houses shouldn't be hampered to be able to bring their families in. So I really thank you for that. I am unequivocally opposed to stratification of 1-acre lots. I'm also completely opposed to the size that you have proposed as the carriage houses at 1,937 square feet. We previously spent a fair bit of time looking at carriage houses and increasing them from, I think it was 1,050 square feet up to a pretty close to 1,500 square feet, I think it was about. And we figured that that was the real sweet spot, that the massing of these structures wouldn't take away from the integrity of the principal residence, and people would clearly identify them as carriage houses and keep with the kind of the character of certain and specific neighborhoods. So I'm certainly in favor of that. This is a very big challenge, because I agreed with Councillor Trowbridge's thing, is that there has to be from 0 to maybe half-acre, allowing carriage houses, depending as it meets the FAR of the half-acre lot. From 0 to half-acre, allowing the suites, which are part of Bill 44. We don't have a choice there. And then from the half-acre up to the acre, allowing the carriage houses, one or the other, according to the FAR of what's allowed to be built on the property, and then above 1 acre, allowing both. The problem is as all of us know, is regulating that and being able to enforce it does become a bit challenging because of the suites and the basements. We already have, several suites in basements that shouldn't even be there as it is. So it will be a bit of a challenge. I was just wondering, on page 148, where it says coach house size will be regulated by parcel size, would it not be practical to add and not principal residence?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, we could add that.
Yeah, yeah. So with that, and other than that, it is a very, some of it gets very technical regarding the garages, because we've had number of carriage houses where garages have later on, after final inspection, have been turned into the carriage houses themselves. And it's a real big challenge to how big of a garage do we allow for these to be able, and is there plumbing in there and stuff like that.
So as part of the draft bylaw for that section to try and mitigate that,
Yeah.
would be that within a coach house, you can only have a 2-car garage enclosed within that structure to limit
Yeah.
the potential. I mean, there's the potential, but it limits it to some degree compared to what we've seen in the past of 4-car garage ports and stuff being converted. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm really glad that this is good, and hopefully it'll come back at a subsequent meeting. We can get, especially these people have been waiting patiently about seeing where they were going. So basically, we've got a motion on the table just saying, look, give direction towards staff for an upcoming, and we'll be able to have a wholesome debate at that point in time. So with that being said, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you both. We're now on to Anmore Community Hub, Facility Rentals for Meeting, a report dated May 31st from our Chief Administrative Officer. Ms. Elrick, you're up.
Thank you. So at the last meeting, staff brought forward a report just to seek direction on facility rentals for the hub. Based on that feedback and in preparation of being able to facilitate facility rentals, we're in front of you this evening to bring back a policy that would replace the existing out-of-date policies for council's consideration. This policy that is brought forward this evening would set out the criteria for rentals for meetings, workshops, classes, and activities during set hours. Rentals that would include liquor, music, gambling, are not permitted under this policy that is in front of council this evening. So essentially, it would not be for social events at this time. The rentals would include criteria such as minimum age requirements, minimum and maximum booking dates, deposits, rental times, legal and liability requirements. We have set hours in the policy for council's consideration that within existing staff capacity and operations, we could facilitate these types of activities between 9 and 3 p.m. During work weeks. Should council wish to extend those hours beyond that, staff would request some additional budget of $6,000 for the balance of the year, and that would cover any standby or on-call for staff. Should those hours extend, we would accept applications based on the extended hours, and if there was existing staff that was able to cover that on-call or standby, then we would be able to schedule the event. I will note that we do have one pending request for an outside of additional hours right now with respect to the upcoming election in the fall and potentially using this space as a polling station. So if council still wants to move ahead with just the daytime requirements, you may want to consider allowing that activity as it is a pretty low risk, in terms of damage and the rental persons and whatnot. Additionally, the policy has included a tiered approach to identifying user group categories as well as the rental fees. So what staff has done is broken that up into groups of community volunteer groups, which are established groups that council would approve for the benefit that are established for the benefit of the whole community. Then the next tier would be organizations such as government, not-for-profit, school districts, strata councils. Then we would move on to private users, and then so somebody wanting a private meeting or event, and then commercial users. So those would be individuals or businesses using the rental space for profit. So in terms of the rental fees, there is also a fees and charges bylaw amendment attached for your consideration. I've included the table that was included in the last report, but for context, we have developed the fees and charges to be in line with other similar spaces in the area. It is notable that once an additional policy is in place expanding the scope of the types of events that would be permitted, there would be additional fees introduced, such as host fees, additional cleaning costs, other administrative fees to capture the additional footwork that needs to go into those types of events. So I do have a recommendation this evening, and that is that facility rental policy number 53 and Anmore Community Spirit Park policy number 39 be rescinded. That facility rentals for meeting policy number 78 be approved. That a budget of $6,000 be approved for standby and on-call staff costs for facility use. And that first, second, and third reading be given to Anmore Fees and Charges Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw 698, 2024. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, could I get someone to move the reclamation moved and seconded? I'll open up for discussion. Councillor Cryer.
Thank you, and thank you very much for getting this pulled together. I know that it's we put some pressure on you to get cracking, and I appreciate it. It looks great. Couple of things around Elections BC coming in. I feel it would be good to definitely accept that, but also to look at other organizations. I think it's important for us to do this slowly, but not lose any business or opportunities to learn. So if there is someone that would want to do something in the hub, they could come forward as a delegation or however you like it to be, a written request, something like that. And it would be up to the discretion of council. I also think that we should have a date to review, maybe 1 year from when final reading is done, so we can really look at the fees, the good and the bad, and kind of reevaluate, but not just keep rolling along thinking we'll get to it, but have a set date maybe that we can diarize. And then wondering, I don't know, I'm sure you've had conversation about this, but would there be an opportunity for, and this may muddy the waters, but a resident rate that's, say, a little bit less per hour, or are we just going to stay away from that? I know and appreciate and agree that we need to do the community volunteer groups at no charge. I think that's really important. But is it a conversation, and maybe it's a conversation we have 1 year from now, about what it would look like for a community member? And those are all my questions.
Sure. Thank you. Through the chair. So I do think it's a good idea to sort of keep the ball rolling and make sure that we're revisiting this. And certainly, I think if we phase this in, we would assess over the next several months the activity and interest and potential interest for broadening the events. And then at that time, we would be able to assess our needs and the appropriateness of fees and whatnot. In terms of the resident rate, that's something that certainly could be considered should council choose to do that. We have broken the rates up somewhat, so that may be captured a little bit there. In terms of commercial users, individuals and businesses using the rental space for profit, we do need to be mindful of the legislation in place in terms of aiding and assisting a business, where if it was a for-profit, whether it's a resident or not, we would want to be mindful of not providing a benefit to a business just because the business owner is a resident. So there are a few nuances there, but something that we could definitely, put a pin on to consider in the future should council wish to do that.
I also think it's important to make sure, as we're going along, not wait a year, to make sure that our fee, we're recovering everything. It's not costing us money to do business. As we're learning, we need to sort through that.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that we've already turned our mind to in terms of how we are going to track any revenue realized through this, and be able to hold it up against our expenses. We're definitely coming up with a process in which we can capture those for sure.
Good, thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Okay, so I think it's overall great. It's got to get this thing going. I had a few comments just to clarify. It's not just daytime, it's actually the daytime evenings as available of person. Same with weekends, correct? If there's a person available, they can do it?
Through the chair, currently, yes, that is what is included in the proposal. So council can choose to, consider that path or just go with the 9 to 3. Either way.
I'm okay.
Yep.
As long as we start, because you got to start somewhere. I have to admit, my heart kind of freaked out a bit when I read that you could get a key pass and come in on the weekend and have your party and nobody's around. I don't know, that made me nervous for some reason. Yes, there's a person on call, but to start, that seemed a bit risky to me. And then when I looked at like the penalties and fees if people don't behave, I'm more harsh. I'd say you don't clean up, we beat you up with $500. You don't clean up twice, you never get to rent again in your life. But we're going to work that out over time, so I'm okay as a starting place, but I always worry about abuse. I guess it's that helicopter party we had in Anmore a few years ago. That same crowd comes in, we come Sunday morning and the windows are all gone and whatever else is going on, right? So that's my only thoughts.
Thank you. Through the chair, so to address the key pass comment, I would envision and what most other organizations do is they would charge a host fee on those higher risk events. So right now we're just talking meetings and those types of things. So if you're talking events that there's liquor served, that there's gambling, those types of things, staff would recommend that there is personnel, a host on site during those times. So that's part of the phased-in approach as well. And in terms of the fines, we can definitely look and assess to see whether they're reasonable or not, taking into consideration that in terms of fees, we charge our fees for cleaning and whatnot on a cost recovery basis. So again, to that point and to Councillor Crier's point, we would be logging those and assessing them throughout.
You're good? Yeah, first of all, I'm very happy to see this coming forward. It seems like at every event I have people coming out to me going, when can this be opened up? And so I'm very, very appreciative of it coming forward. This is a beautiful facility, and this is a facility that was paid by the taxpayers of Anmore, and they deserve to be able to use this. But there's a process that we're going to have to go through. I'm certainly in favor of the 9 to 3. We don't have a caretaker right now, nor do we have adequate parking to facilitate any functions of any significance. So 9 to 3, I think, is a good way for us to dip our toe in the water, so to speak, and start and seeing how things are going to be playing out. We have staff here. It makes it very, not very big impact on everything like that. So I certainly would be that, but I'm also in favor, as Councillor Crier said, in regards to making a commitment to the Elections BC, because again, it won't require significant parking as people are coming and going through the election in the fall, which will be a provincial election. Good money that could come into this, and we can also, allowing us that daytime usage in this, we'll be able to monitor to see how things are going. You know, there's a lot of bugs to work out in this building. We're still working them out. You know, last week we had 2 days where the power went out during the afternoon, and we realized that the washrooms, the toilets didn't flush. You know, we have a generator that runs the whole building, but certain things, there was an issue with the elevators as well. We certainly, you know, there's a lot that's going on still to this day, and we've only been in here now for 6 months. So I think it's really important that we take our time, we get into this gradually. I'd also like the fact that, as Councillor Cryer stated, for any of the community groups that want to come and use it for a specific purpose, that they could easily come as a delegation and come forward. So I'm certainly in favor of that right now. I'm certainly in favor as well as to allocate the funding for it, because I think it will be recovered fairly quickly, but I'm not in favor of bringing in, as Councillor Richards has said, after hours things at this point in time until we have people, security, we have adequate parking, we have facility operators that are able here, because I think it's unfair for staff to be getting called all throughout the evening if they're not even around to be able to come to here while something has gone wrong. And we've had issues with card access. My wife Carrie, you know, she does the bingo, the kids bingo here, and there's been a couple times where the cards haven't worked and stuff. We're still, like I said, there's still a few gremlins in the system. So, but I really appreciate that we get this going, we get this opened up to the community in a gradual process. So I will be supporting, but the following with what Councillor Cryer said, which is the 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. and with special events on a case-by-case basis.
So the recommendation could be amended that the facility rentals for meetings policy 78 be approved as amended to remove the evening and weekend times, if that's, and then at this time there is no budget. The budget requirements was for staffing for those evening and weekends, so I don't think that staff would need to seek any additional budget at this time if we're not outside of regular hours. So we could remove that.
And rescind the previous bylaw as well.
Yeah, and rescind the policies. Then readings to the bylaw still remain. And the elections BC to allow the elections BC rental for the fall election.
Councillor Trowbridge.
Yeah, I would support keeping the 6,000 in place and not removing it as a contingency, because I think there's less we know than more we know. So I'd hate to see you take that out and then all of a sudden we have to go through a process to put it back.
I agree. Yeah. To leave the $6,000 as a place mark. Yeah. So, okay. Do you have an amended? Oh, Councillor Richardson.
So if I understand the amendment, it's to only do the daytime. I would think, again, because Mayor McEwen said this is the taxpayers' building, are we going to set a time frame for that, like 3 months of that or 4 months of that, and then we're going to phase something in? I like to actually have a set target on when the next phase begins.
We did comment that by special, people could come as for special things during that time as well. But maybe in the fall we look at opening it up to extended hours after we get kind of through that period.
So I think through the chair that staff would definitely want to bring something back to council before the end of the year in preparation of budget conversations for next year, because if there were additional expanded hours or types of events, then there would be budget associated with that. So staff would want to be able to bring that forward to council. So I would say it would organically come back to you sometime this fall regardless, as part of the budget discussion, if that is satisfactory.
I would actually appreciate something more concrete, because I know that things can get delayed. So like mid-September or October 1st or something. And the reason I say that is because we're moving into the dark hours at that point, and I can see people want to use this facility and stuff in the evening. So if we got to drive, things tend to happen more than if there's not a deadline.
Sure. So through the chair, we typically only have one meeting in September due to UBCM. So perhaps I could suggest that we come back by the end of October.
Yep. Okay. So do we have an amended motion? Oh, Councillor Wevering.
Yeah, I just want to support Councillor Richardson's comments. I think we're going to start seeing some pressure from people, especially as you get towards September and all the groups reformulate. People have been asking, and I think it's a lot easier to deal with if we have a bit of a plan and we can give them an answer. Look, this is why we're taking this long, and this is why we're doing it slowly. We're working the bugs out, and this is the target for evening groups. That's all I would suggest.
So I have the amendment that facility rentals for meetings policy number 78 be approved as amended to remove evenings and weekend rentals, allow for organizations and businesses to be delegations to council to approve facility rentals, and that the policy be reviewed by the end of October 2024, and that elections be approved to rent the facility outside of regular operating hours.
Can I get someone to move that? Move. Second. I guess we have to rescind the first one that we moved and seconded, though.
Yeah, so the rest of the recommendation hasn't changed, that the facility rentals policy 53 and 39 be rescinded, and the budget stayed as part of the original recommendation, and for second, third readings of the Anmore fees and charges bylaws was
Okay, so we're just voting on the amended motion that's before us. Okay, any more discussion? See none? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We're now on to 11A, new business, UBCM meeting requests. Ms. Elrick.
Thank you. So as the UBCM convention coming up in September, as it does every year, there's an opportunity for council to request meetings with provincial ministers, and the deadline for that is the third week of June, I believe. So if council wishes to request any meetings, staff would seek direction, and we can put those meeting requests in. The meeting requests specifies which minister that you would like to meet with, and also the reason why you would like to take that meeting.
Now, I will preface with the fact that we will be in an election, so a lot of the ministers will not be meeting with members of council. It'll be just their staff that we'll be meeting. So just wanted to throw that out there. Councillor Weber.
I would like to meet with the transportation minister and talk about
Minister Fleming.
Minister Fleming, and talk about access from community to community and community's ability to remove that access.
Anything else? We do have a standing one with BC Hydro that we normally do. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? No? Okay. We'll move on then. Go ahead.
Sorry, did you want to vote on staff be directed to request the following minister meetings at the 2024 UBCN convention, and that it would be transportation minister regarding connectivity and transportation throughout region?
Okay, could I get someone to move that? Sorry. Move. Second. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Okay, we'll now move on to committee recommendations. Ms. Elrick.
Thank you. So at the last meeting, staff brought forward a list of recommendations that had come through the first meeting of all our newly formed committees, and it was quite a comprehensive list, so we've gone back now and done a bit of a deeper dig. This report before council this evening provides either an update on activity that was mentioned at a meeting or information requested, or you know, whether it's underway and ongoing, and then also provides some information on projects should council wish to identify you know, further research or refer those back to committee for further discussion. So I'll just briefly go over sort of what we heard. From the CC committee, the accessibility plan, this is underway as coordination to have Disability Alliance BC to attend a future council meeting to assist in informing this process is happening. So we are coordinating with that. As you heard this evening, we're moving ahead with the framework and policy for Village Hub and rental that came up from both CC and Parks and Rec committee. Youth bingo has now been reestablished, and 2 bingo events were held so far on April 28th and Sunday, June 2nd. So I understand that those were both successful. In terms of the broader emergency preparedness umbrella that was brought up by public safety, just as an update, and we perhaps don't report back to council and the community as often as we could on what we're doing for emergency preparedness. So of course we just launched our Alertable app. We have an underway community wildfire resiliency plan grant application. We participate in Shakeout every year. We also have staff representation at both regional and sub-regional emergency planning committees. So by that I mean regional throughout the Metro Vancouver region, and then sub-regional with our Tri-Cities plus the 2 villages groups. We are assessing implications. There's new emergency management legislation that's just come into place, so we're assessing the implications and what we need to make changes on there. We received our $30,000 grant funding for our outfitting our EOC at the hub here. And then we're currently also coordinating with the sub-regional group and First Nations to identify a collaborative project, as we received $40,000 of grant funding to undertake a project related to First Nations engagement. And again, the ongoing assessment for updates to our disaster plan, coordination with outside agencies and utilities, and we are always engaging in opportunities offered through the Justice Institute that are free of charge to us as a local government to train up our staff on EOC. There's several different modules, and we've recently had 2 staff members in the last couple of months go through some training, and we continue to offer that on an ongoing basis. So that's an update on what we're doing in emergency management. Traffic issues and speed watch coordination is something that was also brought up by public safety. So we had heard this before, and there's a Tri-City Speed Watch group that's a partnership between Coquitlam RCMP, Port Moody Police, and ICBC. They are a volunteer program. Currently, there are no Anmore volunteers in this program, and they assess the areas to attend and sort of set up. You may have seen them in other communities. They have Speed Watch radar signs that they set up. They assess based on need. And on risk of the community. So in speaking with Corporal Romer, it may be challenging based on the number of traffic complaints that we get here in Anmore and the collisions that are in Anmore when this broader group is considering all of Tri-Cities, and they're looking at major corridors and Lougheed Highway and those sorts of things. We can certainly try and engage with them, but it is probably unlikely that they would consider Anmore an area of interest to attend. And then in terms of future traffic issues and emergency access, all of the engagement will take place through development applications on any of those issues of potential future traffic concerns. Our procedure bylaw is already underway for update. So taking in the comment regarding the public input, that's something that certainly can be brought up under that process. And I know that Ms. Schell has been working on that. In terms of the Barraware from the Environment Committee, we are continuing to coordinate and engage with the Tri-City Barraware, which we just engaged with that group for the first time last year, and they did some public education for us. So we'll do that. There's also a working group amongst regional local government that includes the bylaw enforcement. So we'll join in on that group and continue with our communication and messaging to reduce attractants and negative wildlife interactions. In terms of the School District 43 community use agreement from the Parks and Rec Committee, there was a comment regarding bringing out the original agreement. So that agreement from 2003 is no longer in effect. It was actually updated and replaced in 2018. The school district is actually seeking, as it's been over 5 years now, they are asking to update it again. When I asked about the updates that they think that would be required, they were thinking just basic sort of housekeeping updates. So I'm not sure if there's much value in going back to the 2003 because it has been renegotiated and updated in 2018. The tree bylaw, that is an ongoing thing. There was a review from the Environment Committee quite a while back now and referral from Council. Staff prepared a report and received some direction to provide some updates which were generally related to definitions and clarity. So that's something that will be ongoing, and now that we have some additional staff on board, we hopefully can get on to bringing that back to council in the fall. In terms of Fire Smart, the village does amplify Fire Smart principles and resources. We were, as you know, engaged in a joint project with the other Tri-Cities in 2021, and should council wish to take a further step of actually becoming a Fire Smart community, there are several requirements that would need to be met, which includes engaging with a paid contractor who is an actual Fire Smart representative. We would need to sponsor local committee. We need to conduct events. There's a capital investment that is required, $2 per resident, and annual reports and all. It is quite an intense process, but that's definitely something, should council wish to in the future, fund or have staff report back on needs requirements. That's something we could certainly do. The village events from the CC committee, that's something that could certainly be referred back to staff in terms of consideration of future events. We could definitely report back on budget and resource requirements to support either new standalone events or incorporate components into existing events. A phone book was another idea. That would be something that would need to be brought, just due to privacy regulations, we would need to do that through staff. We couldn't really have that private information floating, unfortunately, amongst volunteers. Litter signage, that's something that would be fairly straightforward in terms of if council would like to identify budget and areas where signage could be included. We could also consider updating bylaws, although littering is probably quite a difficult activity to sort of catch somebody in the act doing. So I'm not sure what the payoff for that would be. And lastly, a couple of things in terms of Environment Committee, the development of wildlife corridors. That's definitely something that sort of is outside the wheelhouse of any of the existing staff, and we could definitely engage with somebody on sort of steps on ways that we could engage in that activity. And lastly, in terms of the trail connectivity proposal with Torca, we certainly can share our current trail map for discussion with Councillor Trowbridge's committee. And then just another point of interest to the Parks and Rec Committee and Council is that staff is currently and has been more engaged more recently in the last several months with the City of Port Moody staff to identify connectivity opportunities. So they are undergoing an update, I believe, to their Parks Master Plan or trails or something. So they're quite engaged with our operations staff right now. So that is ongoing. This evening, the recommendation would just simply be that the report entitled Council Committee Recommendations prepared by the CAO be received for information. But But if council wants to identify any items that they would want to refer to committee or refer to staff for further information, those options are available as well.
Good. Can I get someone to move receipt? Moved. Seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Richardson.
I'm happy it's all well taken care of. My concern is we haven't had committees for a long time. We finally get the committees together, we start them, and it's going quiet. And if council doesn't give them anything to do, they will disappear. And that's my concern. So.
Good. Any other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor of receipt? Moved. Okay. We'll move on. We now move on to 11C, Pinnacle Ridge Hillside OCP Amendment Application. Mr. Boyd.
Thank you, Mayor McEwen. I've got a fairly significant report here. I'll try and be brief to some degree, and please interrupt me if you have comments or questions as I go through it. Okay, so obviously tonight the village received an application back in December 2023 from the owners of the Anmore Gate Limited Partnership and Bellaterra Investments. The parcels of land known as Pinnacle Ridge consist of 4 parcels, which equate to roughly 75 acres. The proponent had a request within their OCP amendment document and zoning document to amend the existing bylaw, the existing OCP policy RLU 8, and it be amended by increasing the permitted density from 1.8 units per acre to 3.5 units per acre. It's important that I accentuate units because it becomes an integral part of this report later on. Okay, and also to allow for future CD zone on the subject lands, which are designated as hillside residential within Anmore's current OCP, and are currently zoned as RS1 development. The amendment to increase density would allow for 261 residential housing units consisting of a mix of single-family, semi-detached homes and townhomes. It's important to note that the basis of the OCP amendment request an increase from 1.8 units per acre to 3.5 units per acre. However, the OCP actually states the following under RLU 8. Proposed development does not exceed a gross density of lots per acre. This is important as there is a significant difference between lots per acre and units per acre. Okay, staff reviewed Pinnacle Ridge Hillside OCP amendment application. In consideration of Anmore's OCP policies and identified areas that align with the OCP residential land use policies, but may need to be further analyzed in conjunction with proposed amendments to density and associated plans. While the village's residential settlement patterns have historically been focused on large lot single-family dwellings, the following is the stated intention of the OCP's residential land use policies. And I'll quote, to provide a framework for future residential development that will prioritize environmental protection, enhance the semi-rural character of the village, and minimize infrastructure costs. So beyond the fundamental intent, the residential land use policies aim to welcome the potential to explore new and innovative development approaches to address the challenges of developing on the hillside, protecting riparian areas, and to accommodate the various housing needs of existing and future residents, as well as changing needs of residents who wish to age in place. So, considering the above, numerous residential land use policies in the OCP can be interpreted to direct new residential subdivision to the hillside residential areas, where alternatives and an innovative development proposal shall be encouraged for land in proximity to environmentally sensitive areas. So lastly, the policy RLU 8 support the consideration of CD zoning for the following specific development proposals that Pinnacle Ridge may be interpreted to exhibit. Proposed development cannot be accommodated under the existing zoning given possible site conditions such as varied terrain and natural environment features, or proposed development evidences a level of innovation in site design and housing choices that could be otherwise accommodated by existing zoning, or proposed development delivers a demonstrable and overall benefit to the community socially, environmentally, and economically. So these are 3 important considerations as we move forward in the OCP review. So the following highlights how the Pinnacle Ridge OCP amendment application meet these requirements. The application submitted by the proponent in December contains a comprehensive submission for an amendment to the village's OCP. The application outlines the applicant's collective vision to craft a community seamlessly integrated with Anmore's natural beauty and creative amenities, an aim for the Pinnacle Ridge to, just quoting this, enhance Anmore's unique essence and preserve the surrounding environment while pioneering a financially sustainable model to benefit the community. The application highlights the following development objectives: protect the semi-rural character, enhance the natural environment, establish a financially sustainable community. So approximately 35% of the land is proposed to be dedicated to green space, an integrated trail network, acting as an interface between the lands and the surrounding neighborhood. The plan proposes to reduce the development footprint and preserve the natural environment by focusing cluster housing towards areas with gentle slopes. The application proposes design guidelines to align with the existing neighborhood character in tandem with the preservation of the existing terrain, natural landscape, and to aim to protect the semi-rural character of the village. The cluster housing mix and density aims to establish a financially sustainable community by expanding Anmore's tax base. The proposed housing mix totals of 261 housing units, consists of 59 single-family dwelling units, 42 semi-detached housing units, and 160 townhomes. Okay, to provide context for the OCP amendment, staff have reviewed the application against Anmore's existing policies regarding development and housing within the municipality. The main policy document and reports used for the assessment include the existing OCP and the housing needs assessment, which was conducted in 2022, I believe. So the current OCP versus the amendment. The current residential land use objectives are intended to provide a framework for future development that will prioritize the following: environmental protection, enhance semi-character of the village, and minimize infrastructure costs. Okay, environmental protection. So several residential land use policies prioritize the preservation of natural environment and environmentally sensitive areas. Certain policies allow flexibility for the hillside residential lands, such as policy RLU2, which seeks to encourage alternative and innovative development proposals on hillside in proximity to environmentally sensitive areas. Policy RLU6 encourages cluster housing zoning to enable hillside to be developed in a comprehensive and environmentally sensitive manner where the development does not exceed a gross density of 1.5 lots per acre. A policy RLU8 allows further flexibility to allow for 1.8 lots per acre for comprehensive development, where the proposed development cannot be accommodated by existing zoning given the varied terrain and natural environment features. So I'll move on to RLU3 to design the land and make use of the best practices for ecological sensitivity and anticipates and employs strategies to minimize financial impact to the village in terms of ongoing infrastructure, maintenance, and requirements. So based on these policies, generally the application meets the requirements as stated within the existing OCP. The application proposes to dedicate 35% of the lands for the green space to the western portion of Pinnacle Ridge, which generally exhibits a slopes of an increase of 25% to minimize impact to the existing natural environment. A focused residential development to those lands proportional of lands on gentle slopes to the west of Pinnacle. The application was accompanied by an array of supporting assessments, including environmental assessment reports, which identified streams and northern parcels as identified by the Riparian Protection Act and Water Sustainability Act for the site. Designs have been adopted and accommodate recommended prescribed setbacks in accordance with the report. However, the proponent acknowledges these are provisional and the contingent on the outcome of the additional environmental studies where changes to the overall concept plan may be required. Let's take a quick break. So another important section. Enhance the semi-rural character of the village. There are numerous policies that intend to preserve and enhance the semi-rural character of the village, such as RLU4, which encourages developers to incorporate landscape schemes, building design, and exterior materials that keep with a natural setting and semi-rural character. I just make a side note. This is something that can be regulated via DP zones, which can be introduced via zoning as well within these areas. So that's how we could regulate form and character within a zone. It doesn't have to be via an OCP. We can have development zones as well. Policy RLU16 supports infill development and maintain the existing semi-rural character of Anmore and allows a density of up to 2.4 parcels per acre. In this lens, the OCP can be interpreted to imply that increased density may not take away from the semi-rural character of the village, and it may enhance and not take away from the look and feel of the neighborhood. So the reason that's in there is to say that staff, when they're reviewing our existing OCP, there are areas that we try and use that document to imply, does this meet the intent of the existing OCP or not? And we're trying to pick out the policies which might identify that. So that's why we're going through policy by policy to try and interpret why staff would come to the final conclusion in the report. Okay, the application seeks to amend the policy RLU 8 to increase the maximum gross density of 1.8 lots per acre to 3.5 units per acre to accommodate the proposed development. Again, this is really important. They're misinterpreting between units and lots. There's a significant difference between these. There is further commentary within the report regarding the lots per acre and the units per acre, as just stated. So the application does specify a townhouse housing type. This housing type is not part of the village's current housing stock. Therefore, they may or may not be seen to fit within the village's semi-rural character. The current OCP's housing policy is specified within S3 to S6, with S3 providing partial alignment with reference to an innovative and affordable housing. However, the current policies do not provide clear direction on whether townhomes are seen as semi-rural or fitting within the rural designation of Anmore. I'd also just like to point out as well, there is currently discussion at Metro Vancouver about the definition of rural within the greater context of the region. So that's something that's happening on the side of us right now. There will be consultation with Metro Vancouver into the future as they move that conversation forward. Okay, so policy S6 refers to housing action plan to assess the housing needs. So in 2021, I misquoted myself earlier, the village undertook a housing needs assessment which highlighted the need for future townhomes with the application process. So I've just taken an extract from the housing needs assessment which points out that the distribution that requiring applying a 2016 distribution against the overall projection of an additional 175 homes suggests that 59% of homes, 103, should be 3+ bedroom detached, 31% should be small townhomes, bungalows or semi-detached, and 17 should be 1 bedroom plus den. Okay, another section was about minimizing infrastructure costs. So higher density allows infrastructure such as roadways, water and electricity to serve more people within a smaller geographic area. This concentration reduces the per capita cost of providing these services and most importantly to residents of the village maintaining and replacing these assets, which will become a cost to the taxpayer into the future. Therefore, the proposed increased density of the hillside development helps move the village in the right direction. So an important definition here, lots versus units. It's important to distinguish between lots per acre and the units per acre, as they refer to different aspects of land use and housing density. The village's OCP refers to lots per acre and not units per acre. The following provides an overview of the definition of each. So, definition of lots per acre, the number of individual parcels of land or lots within 1 acre of land. So typical usage is commonly used in the context of single-family residential development, where each lot typically contains 1 housing unit. For example, if there are 4 lots in an acre, the density would be 4 lots per acre. Okay, so the general characteristics and measurement of focus of the division of the land into separate standalone plots is usually associated with suburban or low-density housing. Units per acre, the definition, the number of individual housing units within a 1 acre land. So the usage, it can be applied to various types of housing, including single-family homes, duplexes, townhomes, and multifamily apartment buildings. For instance, if a multifamily building on a 1 acre contains 4 townhomes, the density is 4 units per acre. It's general characteristics of the measurement of focus of the number of units rather than the number of lots. It provides a more flexible understanding of density as it encompasses different housing typologies and is often used in urban planning to assess and regulate housing density. So the primary reason for the OCP application was to provide an increase to the OCP's 1.8 units per acre. However, the applicant misinterpreted the OCP by stating units instead of lots. Following staff's review of the application and subsequent correspondence with the applicant, they have confirmed that the proposed development is actually 1.25 lots per acre, which is below the maximum of 1.8 lots per acre. So just to give you a little bit of context when it comes to units, the village currently allows for 3 units per acre on an RS1. That's in definition of a secondary suite, a coach house, and a primary residence. And to give some more clarification, a CD zone, which can have up to 1/3 of an acre as a parcel density, can allow up to a residential and a secondary suite. So by proxy, you could say that that's 6 units per acre. Okay, before I get to the recommendations, this obviously was not quite a straightforward report in regards to some of the areas discussed within this report. I've tried to use the documents which are in front of me and looked at the definitions within there. Some of the things I think council should be cognizant of is the housing types, a bit of discussion on housing type and the typology, because we do not specify that within our OCP. However, those things can be discussed at a rezoning and decided at a rezoning. And I just want to make one other clarification that was made tonight that the eagle-eyed of you may understand, is that if this application is seen by council to be in alignment with the OCP, it would mean via the new legislation that a public hearing is not required at a rezoning. Now, a lot of people misunderstand the public hearing and consultation. Consultation is still allowed, so we can go to community engagement processes for this application of rezoning. We're just not allowed, if we decide it is in line with the OCP process, to actually have a physical public hearing. Okay.
So open up to council for some discussion. Start us off, Mr. Councillor Weber.
Things. Of course, I want to tick all the boxes and do everything properly, but I understand your interpretation of the OCP, and yeah, it's especially with Bill 44, it's going to be even more complicated. So that probably brings my first question. As there's some single-family homes, would they be subject to Bill C-44 right away and be allowed secondary suites? So then, effectively, our units would be even higher.
Correct.
Would that be above what would be acceptable as per our OCP?
Well, our OCP refers to lots per acre and not units per acre. So it would be in alignment by the definition of what is within the existing OCP.
Okay, so that technically we would still be okay. Okay. I noticed we had always talked about if that area was going to be developed, that Charlotte Crescent was going to go through one way or the other. There would be nothing allowed until that happened. I don't see that here.
Yes, so that, because we're just looking at the OCP, which is a very high-level planning document.
Okay.
We typically don't get into some of what I would refer to as perhaps a little bit of the minutiae of the extension of that roadway.
Okay.
However, that extension of the roadway would be required as a subdivision requirement because they would not be able to meet our requirements of cul-de-sac length.
Right.
And it would be a health and safety risk. So I would say it is a requirement for this development to be created that roadway be extended through.
Good. So that's nothing's changed there. All right. How are they going to do septic? Is it going to be community septic, group septic, individual septic, or combination? I know maybe I'm getting into the details again, but just curious.
Yes, I think that there's more discussion to be had among that, and I think that is something as council can discuss at a rezoning of specifying those types of pieces.
And from a tax perspective and cost perspective, is this positive, neutral, still negative? I mean, I know these steep slope developments are just challenging from a financial sustainability point of view. In your opinion, is this there? Is it enough?
There's more detail to be reviewed along that.
Okay.
I think that's something that very much needs to be reviewed at rezoning to ensure that density meets the requirements for fiscally responsible. It is certainly in the right direction compared to RS1.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for now.
Councillor Trowbridge.
So in the OCP, we speak to an LPA of 1.8. This development is proposing an LPA of 1.25. So it fits within the OCP. So really, what I'm getting at is there isn't an OCP amendment really required here. I see within, I marked all the things and all the different ways it was referred to as lots per acre against this, against that. But that comes down to semantics in terms of the guts of the proposal. They're proposing an LPA of 125 against an OCP of 1.8. So, and our real control over density, numbers of townhomes versus comes at the rezoning stage anyway. So are you proposing, and if not, will you propose that we skip the OCP piece and put this to rezoning so that we can talk about the details of it?
So that is staff's recommendation at this point in time, is to proceed to a rezoning and not require an OCP amendment. But again, I think it's worthy of the discussion regarding housing types and whatnot amongst council to see. For transparency's sake, this was not an easy report to write. As our OCP is vague in some areas regarding this, and as you can see, where we reached out to review our housing needs assessment report, which isn't really part of our OCP, to provide a little bit more guidance on housing types and what have you. So that's why we've kind of reached around a little bit on some of our planning documents to say, does this fall within the lines of our existing OCP, a yes or a no? And I've, to be very frank, as a development manager, I've tended towards the side of yes. I think it does more tend towards the OCP, the existing OCP, and therefore I don't think it requires an OCP amendment process.
Right. So I'll come back to it. The real club we carry is a rezoning club anyway, as a council. So the village is protected. They still have to go through the rezoning firewall, so to speak, to get anything accomplished at all. So I'm comfortable from that standpoint. The other thing relative to rezoning and public engagement versus public hearing, I understand the distinction, and just a comment, public engagement is something I'm still in favor of. Whether or not there's a hearing or how that all plays out, there's still an opportunity for public engagement, and I want to make sure that stays alive.
Yeah, it would very much be staff's recommendation that there is public consultation on this development as we go through a rezoning as well. Yeah.
Good. Just let me quickly. Oh, in terms of, I think it was Councillor Wevering said something about septic, etc. The village has no jurisdiction over septic, so we don't determine that. And correct me, please, if I misstate this, but the applicant will have to prove out their concept with Fraser Health, and Fraser Health will have to either approve or deny the form of sewage treatment that they propose. It's not something that we even weigh in on, correct? Other than if Fraser Health approves it, or let me rephrase that, until Fraser Health approves the treatment of sewage, the handling of sewage, we would not grant building permits and things like that anyway, correct?
That's correct. It just provides some clarification. There are two types of septic system. There is communal, and there are more or less individual septic systems. One is the lower end, so for single family dwellings, like most people in the village, their jurisdiction is under Fraser Health, and so Fraser Health would regulate that septic system. Now, if it was a communal system, which typically means a number of units discharging to one location, that's actually under the province and the Environment of Health.
MOE?
The MOE, that's right. And so
Okay.
they would have to, for other jurisdictions, provide the clarity that this has been accepted on.
Right, and just an observation, because we have a lot of experience with communal systems. The technology is vastly improved and changed, and they are not an environmental risk anymore, and they are capable of multiple housing units. So just when you're going away to do whatever you're proposing, I have no fear of a communal system.
Are you good? Councillor Richardson.
Okay, quick question, simply. When you have a semi-detached house under smooth, does each side get a suite?
I think if put me on the spot, I think the answer would be yes.
Okay, so that adds another 42 on top of the thing. So the units here are really 369 units up there is the proposal if it builds out and Smiths gets applied. I don't bring it up as a negative or a positive, it's just that's what it is. because I worked out, like if you did it in RS1, you get 180 units, 5% park roughly. If you did CD, you would get 269 units and roughly 30% park. And if you actually did infill and got lucky, you could get maybe 360 units and 5% park. So if it was 261 units, I'd be much more comfortable than 369. My concern is more on the look and feel of Anmore. Like, people are complaining about not in my backyard, don't want to see it. My understanding is we'll stand here, we'll look over, and we'll see this row of glass, like, I don't know what the design is, that overlooks Anmore. Because if I owned it and I built it, that's what I would do, because I can sell view like crazy, and I'm going to sell as much view as I can sell. So there's probably a way that you can make it look, you know, kind of Anmore, and that can be controlled through zoning and DPs. But I think that's where the big issue lies. I don't like the province and no public hearings, but in the last 6 years, I don't think a public hearing has resulted in any change ever. So I don't know what value they bring. I really would like public consultation. Like this is, from a view point of view or a site point of view, probably a bigger change than what's gonna be proposed down in Icona land. So I think send it off to zoning and see what comes back. But you know, it's a big change to the view and look and feel of Anmore as you drive through it, because you'll see it everywhere. That's my guess from looking at the rough pictures so far.
Councillor Cryer.
Thank you. Thanks for going through all of this with us. I appreciate that. It was complicated and took a little work. I certainly would hate for anyone to have to do more work than they need to, and it sounds like you've checked into everything, and obviously we have a little PTSD over septic systems, but it sounds like we won't have that problem considering the new technology. And I'm definitely interested in seeing the zoning for it, what it looks like, how it fits into the village, because it will make a difference up on the hillside, but we always knew that that was to be developed. So I support going directly to zoning with consultation.
I just have a few final kind of comments. First of all, an application came forward for the hillside in 2018, I think it was. And again, ever since I got on council, this property has kind of been, a month in, we had a fairly significant slide back in 2008 when I first got on council. I certainly don't want to see more 1 acre parcels up on this property. This property is zoned, is residential and will be developed at some time, and I've always said that. You know, where it was left in 2018 was basically, the premise was that it was left, that we asked, council asked for a financial assessment to be done to prove viability, and it just sort of it died off there. So I think the financial viability is a very strong aspect of this because of the infrastructure that's required. I'm certainly don't get hung up on the numbers. As I've said, even with Anmore South, the numbers don't really mean anything to me once we get into the weeds and see. But I will say a couple things about the OCP, because I was there when the OCP got put together, which was back in 2014 and was reviewed. And it was pretty clear, although not, again, it's a guiding principle, it's not detail. And right now we're coming into a tone where the details are really what's lacking and kind of hampering us, which caused you the challenge of interpreting it. I can tell you very clearly that duplexes and joined homes in the OCP were not part of the OCP. I can also tell you as well that looking through your report, in 3 different occasions, the 1.8, the CD zoning on here, which again, this is the perfect example to use CD zoning, because we don't want to have the whole hillside as we had before, which fell down. So this site is what CD zoning was built for. But I'm at a bit of a crossroads with you challenging with your play on words. In this report alone, we have parcels, units, and we have land. Pardon? Lots. And I can tell you that if we go through a couple of it, I just look at, for example, the most recent OCP amendment we had was for infill. And that was an OCP amendment of 2.04 per acre. Using the theory that you're using right now, it should theoretically have been 4. It would have never have passed. It was contentious as it was even at 2.03 with a set of guidelines in place, as well as very strict regulations and a minimum contribution that was going to be coming back to the community. So I am not comfortable with how the interpretation of the 1.8 is being played out currently. I'm also not comfortable in the fact that I think an OCP amendment, which was even at the request of the applicant, should be processed here so that the community can have some input in regards to these two big things. The 3.8 does not scare me, because I think from a financial point of view, that may be the number that needs to be achieved. However, I do think, referring to what Councillor Richardson said about the look and the feel, which is what the OCP is here to dictate our future. And again, I completely agree. It is ambiguous. We never thought that this was going to happen when it was put forth 10 years ago. Things have changed significantly. 10 years ago, if you'd told me that the province was going to come in and dictate what we could and couldn't do with zoning, I would have said you're crazy. What purpose do we have as local government then? So, you know, it's 75 acres of land, and it's challenging land, you know, and I see what's being built there, and I certainly don't want it. Again, I have no issue whatsoever with the units. That will work out, as I've said, even with the Anmore South proposal. I'm very supportive, though, to see in this development the alternate uses of housing, because I think that is what we need. And I think, again, getting back to the CD, this is exactly what it is. But again, I read back to here, it goes, the proponent collectively submitted an application to amend our official community plan designation, OCP bylaw number 532, that's 2014. So I will be supporting an OCP review on this, an application to do this. And also, what I think it does, it stays consistent with the Anmore South application, and also to allow the applicants and follow through with the process that we set up for the OCP regarding Anmore South on this proposal as well. So with that being said, I'm going to move option 2. It may get voted down, but that's where I feel comfortable right now. So I'll put it out there if I have a second. Okay. And I thank you for working your way through it, because I know it was not easy, because even when I read the OCP today, and even it was just, yeah, so.
Would you like me to read the recommendation out, Your Worship?
Pardon me?
Would you like me to read the recommendation out?
Sure.
Okay. That an official community plan bylaw amendment based on the December 2023 Pinnacle Ridge Hillside application be drafted and brought forward for consideration for first reading.
That was, yeah. So I've got a motion on there. If there's no seconder, then we'll just move on. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. No, 183. Pardon me?
No discussion.
Nobody has seconded yet. I've just given a bit of time, but I'll just, yeah. The option number 2 is on page, well, it says 10 above it, and then below it is 183. And I think that follows the same, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Boyd, that follows the same process as Anmore South? Yeah. So is there a seconder? can have discussion after that and vote it down, or no?
Okay, I'm going to second it for the purpose of discussion.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. I'll open up for discussion. Councillor Richardson.
Okay, so the challenge I have with it is my read of the OCP, which aligns more with Mr. Boyd's, is that an OCP amendment's not required. So I don't know how you have one, like you have to amend something. And so it's unclear to me what will be amended. Like it can be done within the OCP is my understanding. So I'm okay with another review to say this is what we could amend, but right now I don't see what you amend. And that's the challenge I have.
Councillor Boyd, or Chris, Mr. Boyd.
Councillor Richardson is correct. We need to have a discussion about what potentially could be amended via the OCP. So further back in the report, the staff did make some vague recommendations of perhaps you might want to discuss housing type and density. But we need, as staff, we need some direction on what you want the amendment to be, because currently what's on the table for the OCP amendment is not consistent, as in what they're asking for amending doesn't make sense.
So we could ask staff, or in this motion, we could ask for that the housing type and density are addressed in the OCP. Kind of review. Yeah. Councillor Trowbridge.
Yes, so there's never been a confusion about the OCP. It's always referred to 1.8 lots per acre. The UPA that we have in Countryside, for example, is way beyond that. So we've always had UPA well beyond the LPA. So again, I don't see, we're consistent with the OCP. I see no reason other than causing an undue delay to get to the nitty-gritty, which is zoning, which will inform the public and council to pass this motion. I'm still locked in on going straight to zoning.
Councillor Weber.
Yeah, I agree with both of my colleagues. I think what we want to do is get into the nitty-gritty of this and get the public involved and move forward. It seems like an unnecessary time delay to do this. If we're compliant with the OCP, based on your interpretation, I think it's another step we don't have to take. I think we can address the concerns that we all have in the rezoning application.
Councillor Richardson.
Just as a question, because it was brought up that like duplexes and townhouses are not in the OCP currently. I haven't read it carefully recently to actually search, but we have duplexes in Anmore. So in the previous edition of the OCP, were duplexes specifically mentioned, or is that a zoning thing? Because I know we had them and then we didn't have them. And I thought that was all zoning done, not OCP done, but I could be incorrect.
I don't know the old OCP, to be honest with you, prior to the one that is in existence. So I can answer that piece, but it's very much that you can regulate the units per acre via zoning. That is one of the primary reasons for zoning, which duplexes and what have you would equate to as well.
Anyway, I'll call the question. This is for option number 2. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion is defeated. Would somebody like to put another motion on the table? The recommended? Sure.
That staff be directed to bring forward a rezoning amendment bylaw for council's consideration in relation to Pinnacle Ridge Hillside Estate application.
Someone to move that? Second? Any discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, now get on to Mayor's reports. May 11th, myself and I won't steal your thunder, but we attended POCO Days. We took our classic cars. We were missing one car, that's for sure. Anyway, amazing day, amazing turnout by the community. On the May 14th, I explored the Tri-City Economic Summit with Councillor Cryer, which was good. May 15th, we attended a brushing ceremony for a new welcoming pole down at Tum to Yum Tum Regional Park, the Swalotooth. 28th, I also attended the Eagle Mountain Young Entrepreneur Fair, which was really good, kind of a first year since the Anmore Entrepreneur Fair, which usually sells out each year, which it was really well attended. 29th, the Garden Club. I hope you all noticed as you walked in, the Garden Club planted the new hub. A big thanks to Nancy and the amazing Garden Club. They just did an amazing job. I'd also like to thank Allison, our Public Works, who sort of did all the layout, picked out all the plants, and also for Sabina for coordinating it. It was an ugly, ugly day, but everybody was out there, brought their tools, and it looks absolutely amazing. Got some really sad news, and that is that a lot of the people that you probably deal with and I deal with on a daily basis, Carmen is retiring. After how many years? 18 years? 17 years? I think she started when I got on council, and she has been amazing. I know a lot of you probably deal with her, and yeah, she's retiring. I told her she wasn't allowed to, but it went on deaf ears. So anyway, and then the last thing I wanted to say is that there's been a lot of concern about fireworks in the community. It used to be a big thing that we did. The last few years we haven't done it because of construction of this, as well as the fire hazards at that time. We've had some pretty dry times on Halloween. This last weekend, and I think it would be great for people to look into it, but Pitt Meadows had Pitt Meadows Days, and Nicole, the mayor, was telling me they did a 20-minute drone show and said that it was really amazing. I have no idea of the costs, no idea of it, but I thought, hey, maybe that's something we look at for Halloween, because it seems like Halloween is a big event in your neighborhood, in the McCulloch subdivision, as well as Ravenswood and around here. With the hub being here this year, I would imagine that we'll be handing out hot chocolate and that, so I think it'll be something that we should look at depending on what the costs are. So there we go, that's all I got. Councillor's report. Councillor Cryer.
Thank you. Love the drone idea. Let's talk more about that. It's been busy. I know we haven't met for a while, but I've had 2 healthier community partnership meetings. McHappy Day, for those of you following along, and my quest to be at the drive-thru. Didn't get there this time. Another POCO counselor got up there, so maybe next year, but it was a great day. It was a really good day. Chamber of Commerce Economic Summit with Mayor McEwen. I too went to the May Day celebration, but I did not make the parade or the breakfast, but I did attend, and it was lovely. It's my first event at the new community hall, and they really did a nice job. Was sorry to miss the garden club, but it looks beautiful, and as usual, our thanks to Nancy and the crew. I did attend the Tri-Cities Food Council meeting, and coming up, as Mayor McEwen mentioned, I believe I'm going to attend the Port Moody Town Hall on the new legislation tomorrow night, just to, at minimum, I'll watch it online, but I think I'll just go and attend. And also I have my first Metro meeting next week.
Good.
Yep, that's it.
Anything else? No? No. Chief Administrative Officer's report.
Thank you. So just a reminder to everybody that our tax notices were mailed out. So if you haven't checked your mailboxes, they should be there. The due date is July 2nd, and there's various ways to pay outlined on the notice. If you didn't receive a notice for some reason, please contact us and we can get a new one printed for you. Additionally, I know it went out in our email notification and by other means, but we are going to be holding some more engagement sessions for Anmore South, and that will be June 12th, 13th, and 19th. They're workshops that we want folks to sign up for. Michelle has just put up the information there for those of you who have your phone with you and want to take a picture of the QR code, or you can visit the village website or the Eventbrite site to register for those. So please come. We definitely want to hear from all of the folks in the village here and make sure that we're engaging on this project. So thank you for that.
Good. I just wanted to compliment you as well. The paper that came with the outline of taxes and that came with our tax notices was really well laid out. Clearly
I'll pass
showed,
that along.
you know, where everything goes, and people don't understand that not a lot of, 32% of our money that comes into the thing goes out to different agencies, and it's good to see where those agencies are. So we got some general correspondence from UVSIM regarding the 2023 SEP grant for the Anmore Emergency Operations Center. I'll now open up to public question period. Anything? If you can just hit the blue button. Yeah. And name and address.
Is it on?
Sounds like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trevor Mukel, 275 Alpine Drive. Just wondering if there's a current bylaw officer in place for the summer months coming up.
Ms. Elmer?
Thank you. We are currently under recruitment for a bylaw officer. He left the village, so we've underwent interviews, and that position should be filled fairly shortly.
Okay, and would that bylaw officer be working weekdays and weekends with the busy lake traffic, or just weekdays?
We do at times flex out. However, we are assessing and in communication with BC Hydro on the measures that they are taking for traffic control at the gate, and continue to assess that and how it impacts. We haven't really had, other than I think one day, good weather yet to really assess that. And I think the day that the weather was good was the very first day of the reservation system. So definitely will ebb and flow and continue the communications with Hydro as needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Anything else?
We're arguing about who should ask this, but Nancy Maloney, 1724 East Road, and Mayor McEwen, related to Bill 44 discussion, is not the province prohibiting via separate legislation short-term rentals except within the main dwelling, the principal residence of the house, is how I understand the short-term rental legislation. That short-term rental can only be within the main dwelling, the principal residence of the house, under that particular legislation.
Josh is on. Josh, you're up.
Hi, hey Nancy, thanks for your question. Yeah, so just paraphrasing the legislation. It says the principal residence requirement limits the operation of a short-term rental to only in the principal residence.
Right.
And or either a secondary suite or accessory dwelling unit. So you can pick one or the other. It can't be both, but within the residence and one of the two. So it could be in two of the units, if that makes sense.
Okay, so not limited to the principal residence is what you're saying?
Correct. Like, so there's the principal residence requirements is a definition revolving around how much time the resident lives in that house, and it needs to be the majority of the time of the year. So that deals with that. The primary dwelling unit, you're allowed to have a STR operation as well as either a secondary dwelling unit or accessory dwelling unit, if that makes more sense to you.
Okay, thank you. A couple of other quick questions here. So this was somewhat addressed by Ms. Elric, and a resident who is unable to attend tonight's meeting requested that I ask if council has a plan for dealing with unsafe driving practices such as speeding and failure to stop at stop signs and crosswalks. And I know Ms. Elric was saying that we were unlikely to be able to participate in Speedwatch. But anyway, so another resident asked me to address council. There's been quite a lot of recent concern in the community about both speeding and failure to stop at stop signs, failure to stop at pedestrian crossings, crosswalks. And does council have an interest in this and a plan?
Thank you. So, in speaking with RCMP, they do encourage folks to report traffic incidents, unsafe driving, those types of things, to the non-emergency line. They do respond to those reports, and I think a while back, Councillor Trowbridge and our former CAO, Ms. Halliwell, had witnessed some similar incident, and it was responded to. So I do encourage residents to report to the non-emergency line, because when it is reported, they can investigate, and they also would potentially base their patrol or whatnot on the number of reported incidents. If they're not getting those phone calls and reported incidents to non-emergency, then they're not aware of it.
So the good thing, that would increase the number of patrols happening in the village.
I can't speak to the RCMP resources directly, but I would say that they do encourage activity to be reported to them.
Okay, a couple more. Yes, sorry.
Yes, so we did get action from the RCMP, and they did follow up. But if it's possible and you see an infraction or unsafe behavior, if you have the time to record the license plate, they will actually go and speak to the individual even long after, next day, same day, whatever. So.
Very difficult to record the license plate of someone who's going 100K, zooming along, but yes, exactly, if possible. Okay, a couple more quick things. So would it be possible for council to request that the Anmore.com website acknowledge that June 2nd to 8th, which we're in at this very moment, is actually BC Seniors Week, which occurs every year during the first week of June. So Dan Levitt, whose name you may have heard, he's a BC Seniors advocate, he has suggested that during this week that communities recognize seniors' contributions and achievements, in addition to providing support to seniors to lead a happy, healthy life. So I know we do such things on the Anmore.com site, but it has yet is not acknowledged that this is Seniors Week. It's province-wide and happens every year at this time.
Thank you. We do occasionally make announcements for that type of thing, acknowledging that it's Seniors Week. It's also Pride Month. It's also Indigenous Awareness Month. So when we do, we re-amplify messages and information from other organizations related to that.
Very good. And lastly here, could council ensure that the Bear Aware link on Anmore's website be corrected? Because when I went to that link and opened it, what opens up is a commercial US site that rents bear spray. So that link no longer leads you to anything related locally to Bear Aware, that it is a commercial site that is renting bear spray. And I've done this numerous times, but also given, even tonight, I've been getting alerts that there's a bear in our neighborhood that was walking through our yard on East Road. A neighbor was alerting us to that fact. So there's been a significant number of recent bear-related issues in Anmore. So I would like to again request that council consider Anmore's participation in the provincial Bear Smart program.
Can you check the website then in regards to the...
Certainly, and it sounds like some of the questions this evening, Ms. Maloney, are more directed at staff than council. So you're most welcome to pop in or send us an email or give us a phone call if you notice things, on the website, links that are broken and things like that. Then
Very
please
good.
feel free to contact staff directly.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Lisa Johnston, 180 Hemlock. Can you please just clarify Bill 44 for some of us still trying to understand it? I think everybody is here tonight. And because you refer to Ravenswood often, I'll just refer to Ravenswood. Does it mean now that every single home on Ravenswood is allowed to have a basement suite?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. And then you clarified what I was going to ask with Nancy. So as long as the occupant of the home spends the majority of the home in that principal residence, the secondary or accessory building that you were concerned about becoming short-term rentals cannot, because provincial legislation came in place May the 1st, restricting that, correct?
So if I'm understanding your question, is that a accessory dwelling unit or a secondary dwelling unit cannot become a short-term rental?
Well,
If, yeah.
sorry, carry on, yeah.
Those are the words I heard. So I think I'm adapting our current bed and breakfast regulations, which speak to the short-term rentals, and that's how we kind of regulate them. The only requirement that's extra is, again, the principal residence requirement, like you mentioned, and then so that they can only operate the STR, that principal resident may only operate the STR within the primary dwelling unit.
Correct.
And one of the two, the secondary dwelling unit or accessory dwelling unit.
Because I understood that it has to only be in your primary residence, according to the legislation, but you clarified. So then if the homeowner is not occupying their principal residence the majority of the year, if they are occupying their home for the majority of the year, then they cannot have a bed and breakfast in the accessory building, or the other way around. And how will you monitor that, I guess?
So
Is bylaws going to...
Principal residence of that property. And I think you were confusing something I said earlier, as in the secondary dwelling units can only be in a primary dwelling unit, not a accessory dwelling unit.
Right.
So those are two separate things. You can still have a short-term rental within a secondary dwelling unit. However, that secondary dwelling unit needs to be in the primary dwelling.
It has to be the primary dwelling. So how do you monitor that then? Because you were concerned about people creating bed and breakfasts in secondary buildings. So how do you know if somebody's there all the time as a resident? And how is bylaws going to control or stop? If you're concerned about parking and you're concerned about bed and breakfasts in secondary separate buildings, how do you control that?
It's a great question, and it's, to be perfectly frank, a question we have been asking ourselves internally of the province of quite simply push this down onto municipal levels of government and saying you shan't do this, but you need to regulate it somehow.
Right.
We don't have the resources currently to regulate it, to be perfectly frank, because part of the provincial requirement was a bulletin that simple paraphrasing was, hey, you should now actually be looking at websites and monitoring websites and all the other kind of stuff. We'll follow up with you how we can help you do that in the future. And honestly, it's one of those things I would say that it's definitely going to be an ongoing challenge within all municipalities of how to do this, because currently, because municipalities are not staffed to regulate Airbnb and other areas right now.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I would just like to add, sorry.
Yeah, and I know to follow up, the province has actually put a team together, and they're also have cooperation from VRBO, Airbnb, and these other sites to be able to get access to all their information. So they're going to be monitoring it fairly closely as well. So hopefully it doesn't all fall on our shoulders.
Yeah, just like, but how do you determine that somebody's there the majority of the time?
That's what they'll be asking for.
Right, like checking travel documents, et cetera. Where's your secondary home in Palm Springs, right? Because, sorry, you were going to add.
Yeah, no, and I was just gonna to echo what Mayor McEwen said. This is the provincial, the province that'll be regulating STRs. We're just amending the language to align with those legislation in our own bylaws.
Right.
So in terms of the actual regulation of short-term rentals, there's going to be a registry which every owner or host has to, get into, and then they have agreements with Airbnb and other sort of STR operational businesses as well. That's going to be monitored by the province. So all that happens at provincial level and not over here. We issue building permits and we can have access to those registries to see who actually is in compliance.
Good. Thanks.
Stephen Robb, 1630 East Road. I just want to thank Mayor and Council for moving forward on the hillside proposal from the Pinnacle Ridge people. It's been a long time in the works, and I appreciate you guys moving forward.
Okay, not seen anyone else. Motion to adjourn. Move second. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Good night, everyone.